got my laptop open, created a Google in my gap year. And in those months, I created mini goals, basically. So I put down, for example, my gap year would have started in June of 2019. So I put June, July, August, September, and I wanted to do per month. Whether they were mini goals, like, for example, initially it was to establish like another WiTech chapter by the end of 2019. And then there were other goals, like, for example, fixing the leadership structure of the organization, making sure that all of the teams had submitted like feedback forms, things like that. Like, you do not have to have like huge encompassing goals. Like, you can have the option to be as specific, as detailed as we want, but at the same time, you are allowed to put brief and really like broad goals within your plan. It's up to you. It's really up to you. What I just suggest is like writing it all down. Don't trust yourself to just automatically recommend that, oh, by this month in my gap year, I'm going to remember to have done these things. Like, you're probably not, unless you have like incredible memory. If you're like me and really need things to be like on paper to get things done, like write down a schedule, open a calendar, open a Google Doc or your Google Calendar, and like list down the things that you want to accomplish per month during your gap. But with that said, like, this doesn't always have to be work-related stuff. You can always schedule time in for self-care. Ways that I spent time taking care of myself throughout my gap year were just simple things like reading recreationally. That is such a huge deal for me because throughout high school, I've always loved my English classes. But because of how busy I was and still am, like, it was very difficult throughout high school for me to just find time to curl up with a book and read for not just like for the essay, but just because I wanted to. And throughout this gap year, I was able to do a 100 books challenge, in which it's basically like pretty self-explanatory. Like, you try to read 100 books. And this challenge I definitely would not have had time for if I did not go on this gap year. Other forms of self-care include working out, doing like YouTube workouts, going on runs, playing tennis with my dad. That's something that I love to do. And really just focusing as well on getting a lot of sleep. And that was another like mini goal for my gap year, because throughout high school, I would clock in like 4 to 5 hours a night, which is not healthy, and I do not advise that. Whereas during this gap year, I've been sleeping around like 7 to 9 hours pretty frequently. So that's a much bigger improvement. Another tip that I have is to create a community. It's so tempting, or it's so kind of the common connotation of taking a gap year is it's a very like isolating experience, especially now during COVID-19. And I want to emphasize that it doesn't have to be like that. Just because you aren't going to school and seeing your friends like 5 days a week does not mean you don't have a community if you don't go on a gap year. You can create a gap community by reaching out to other people that have gone on gap years or that are currently on gap years, and kind of having like a gap year buddy is the best way to describe it. That way you guys can hold yourselves accountable, give you and your gap year buddy kind of updates, and maybe if you want to expand the community into a full-blown chat, you can also look for ways in order to schedule like weekly or maybe monthly Zoom calls to catch up with your gap year buddy, to really not just hold yourselves accountable for the goals that you set forth, but also to just make sure that when you're feeling down or when you're feeling lost, like you have somebody to confide in. When I was planning my gap year in the very like early stages, I was talking to my friend who is also going to go on a gap year. And he, even though he isn't going to Stanford, he's also been filling me in on the things that he's been doing. And it's just been a really great kind of support system along the way. That really links to my next step, which is to hold yourself accountable. You can do that by physically printing out your gap year plan and like putting it on your wall, or putting little post-its like I did for each month, and like making sure that you tick off your mini goals by the end of the month. More than that, I think another really great way to hold yourself accountable is to talk to your friends and your family, those people in your immediate support system, about your plans for your gap. That way you have people asking you, oh, how things are going, and if you want to give them updates, that works too. Overall, just look for ways to motivate yourself to get the work that you set forth to have during those respective months of the gap year done. So hope that makes sense. Let me know if you want me to like elucidate that further later on. Okay, so now I'm going to hop into some of the questions that you guys sent in before the workshop. And one of the recurring questions was, what are the pros and cons of taking a gap year? So pros would definitely be control over your own time. This is something that I found so liberating, because when I was in high school, it was so frustrating for me to have to be in a classroom from 8 a.m. to like 3 p.m. and whenever I got like invitations to speak or to join events that fell under like that time slot, I wouldn't be able to go. And that's like I had to take like a leave of absence on that day, and that was such a hassle to apply for in my school. A huge pro of the gap was being able to have control of my own time, plan my own schedule, say yes to events, stay up for events if I wanted to, wake up early for events if I wanted to, and really not have to be constrained to that like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. schedule that schools typically have. Another great pro is that I've been able to pursue passion projects outside of academics and outside of things like I work with my nonprofit. So like a really small thing that I've been able to do is run pretty frequently throughout this gap year. Like working out was something that I value very much. And during high school, it was just so difficult for me to have like that consistent workout schedule, because at the end of each day, after doing homework, after studying for my tests, and after working on my nonprofit, I would just be so exhausted. Whereas now I can actually like plan ahead and say like, okay, I'm going to schedule a workout for these days. I'm going to get like that type of like ab workout and that type of like rundown by like this week or that week. So yeah, it's really great to have like control over your time during this gap year. With that said, some cons would be that it's very easy, I think, for the days to blur. In the sense that if you do not plan ahead, like it's very easy to just find yourself like waking up at like 10 a.m. and like or like 12 noon, and like having all the days like seem so the same. If you are somebody that struggles with like motivation and like struggles with not procrastinating in terms of the work that you set forth, I think another great way to tackle that con of really like a lack of structure during the gap year would be to really have somebody to talk to about it and really hold yourself like accountable. Like have that gap year buddy, and like both of you guys can really motivate each other and keep each other accountable by checking in on one another about how your plans are, how you're progressing towards your goals. Another big con about the gap year process like right now is like it's very limited by COVID-19. But with that said, like I would twist it around and say that there's so many online opportunities that are present now. You can learn like practically anything online. You can take that coding course you've been putting off. You can take that Coursera course that looks fascinating and that could maybe get you like certification. If you're interested in reading more, you could tackle like that big pile of books by your bed. If you want to if you want to write a book, if you want to catch up with friends more, because that's also another big thing that I was able to do during my gap, like catch up with a lot of friends that I hadn't stayed in touch with as much during my senior year of high school. So really the opportunities are endless, and there are many pros just as there are many cons, and it's really up to you as to how you'll tackle them. Yeah, but let me know if you have like any questions, by the way, about anything I've said. So next question is, what challenges did you face during your gap year? So a really big challenge for me was adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic, because a lot of my plans were very much in-person plans. So the Women in Tech Teach programs, the workshops, the talks that I was supposed to give, like those were all initially in person. So when the virus hit, I ended up having like 12 plus talks canceled for the month of March because it was Women's Month. So that was really, really frustrating. But at the same time, I think I'm really glad that a lot of the organizers of the talks that I was supposed to give, a lot of the student groups that I was supposed to work with, were able to adapt very quickly to this kind of new normal via like Zoom meetings and just using like online platforms. So there are a lot of cons, I think, or there are a lot of limitations with COVID-19, as I said earlier, but at the same time, there are so many while there are limitations, there's so many opportunities to start projects, to learn new skills, to engage with people from around the world, because we have that technology accessible. Like, don't take that technology for granted, because it's something that's definitely not available to everyone. Okay, this is another great question, which is how did I use my time wisely? And I really live and breathe by my Google Calendar and my to-do lists. And I start each day by checking out what is on my Google Calendar for the day. And then I migrate that into like a physical to-do list, in which I just list down in bullet points, like all the things I need to have done. So that's one technique that I use to manage my time. Another thing that I really like to do is make sure that when I am scheduling my time, I'm also scheduling in like self-care break time. So it's not just like, oh, work, work, work in my schedule. It's like there's a block in it for work or giving a talk or going to a meeting. And then afterwards it's like family bonding time or like Netflix night with my mom and things like that. So just really adding like a brief structure, but know that like you don't have to follow things like by the minute, at least in terms of like all the tasks that you need to have done. Like I'm not somebody that says, okay, like at each minute of each day, like this is what I need to be doing. Like it's definitely something like, okay, these are my meetings during the day, and then during these free blocks of time, like I could be doing these skills or taking like these forms of rest. So it's really up to you how you manage, but like those are my tips. Like invest in learning how to use your Google Calendar and having a really good like handy to-do list available to you. And I saved this very relevant question for last before we hop into like the open Q&A. But I was asked, should I take a gap year given the COVID-19 pandemic? COVID-19 is something that I think and many other like fellow gappers from the class of 2019 can agree. Like we never saw this coming. And I know there are a couple of people out there that kind of regretted going on gap years and missing out on being part of the class of 2023. But as an incoming class of 2024 student, like I'm going to be starting school next month, I do not regret going on this gap. Like, even though things have shifted online, even though I have a lot less like in-person opportunities than before, like I'm still really, really grateful for this experience because I've been able to see and work with amazing organizations like Femme For Education, and those opportunities only occurred because of the shift to online, like webinars, online learning, that sort of thing. Whether or not you take a gap year during this year, during this time, it's ultimately up to you and your circumstances. But I highly consider that you ask yourself, like, are you only taking this gap year to put off the year because you want to experience like in-person college, or do you have like a plan, like do you have like a list of things that you want to accomplish, and do you have a way of structuring your time? I caution against like going on a gap year this school year only to like save yourself to be able to experience like in-person college events. Like while that's really like nice, like at the same time it's like if you don't have an idea of what you want to do during this gap, like you're going to be really, really lost. So I'd say that just really consider the circumstances. And if you know what you want to do and you have a plan and you have a project, like go for it, go ahead. But if you don't, like think about it, take some time to just like maybe talk to your friends that have gone on gap years, reach out to people like me that have gone on gaps, and like consider your options, because really there's no like one size fits all approach to a gap year. It's really about how you make use of the time and like how you decide to like allocate like your time and your resources. So yeah, that's it for what I have kind of prepared. I think I can take some questions now. Oh, okay. So that's the full screen. My bad, I just saw that. Okay. So do you know of any situations of a gap year before medical school? I have heard a lot of students doing that before their senior year of college. So yes, I actually have heard of, I have a friend that went on a gap year before going to med school, and what she did is that she volunteered for WiTech. She helped us with a lot of our projects, specifically our Women in Tech Teach program, wherein we developed like CS, basic tech education curriculum for low-income communities. So I have heard of students as well that did a gap year before their senior year of college. So really like it's on a case per case basis, but the common thread with all my friends that have either gapped before medical school or before their senior year of college, like the common theme is that they had like a plan and they had like a list of things they wanted to accomplish, either that or like a pre-existing like club network or like advocacy that they wanted to be able to pursue. So it's all in the planning, it's all about the time allocation, and it's all about being really deliberate about how you spend your time. Okay. LJ is asking me, did you finish the 100 book challenge? So I am very close. I think I'm at like 90 plus, but not quite at 100 just yet. So perhaps I will finish that hopefully before school starts on the 14th. Like there's still time. I'm currently quarantined in SF, so I have time-ish to read. So I hope I'll finish that soon. So yeah, any other any other questions about the gap year process? You can ask me about Stanford as well if that's something that you're interested in. Applying to Stanford as an international student, just like anything under the sun, feel free to ask. Okay, Carolyn's asking, is a gap year a literal whole year? Okay, don't worry. It's not a dumb question. Don't worry at all. Like a gap year is a year, but it can be like as long as like 2 years. Like I have friends that actually are going into Stanford after taking like a 2-year gap year, and that is allowed. And I think a lot of people that go into like service trips and like religious trips for like 2 years, or religious service trips, I mean, like take 2 years off. But yeah, it can be, the minimum's really a year. At least that's how Stanford goes with it. I know that if it's shorter than a year, it's called a leave of absence, if I'm not mistaken, or like a semester of absence. It really depends on like your school, because I know that there are some institutions that allow you, for example, to take fall quarter off, or like winter off, or spring off, rather than like an entire year. It's really like up to the school, like, and their policies. But definitely, like, if you don't feel comfortable taking an entire year off, I do know, and I have a friend that's supposed to start school in New York, but because of financial reasons, she chose to defer and start in the spring instead. And that was totally fine with her school. So, okay, next question is, can you tell us about the business/economics program there in Stanford? I cannot tell you much because I am not knowledgeable in it, but I'm sure like if you check out like their website, or just like go online and search up like Stanford Business and Econ, like there are a lot of resources on that. But personally, I'm not knowledgeable on those programs. Do you know any external scholarships for international students who want to study in the USA? Yes, I do. So if you are a woman that wants to study in a male-dominated field, there's Zonta scholarships available. So I am a Zonta Women in Technology Regional Scholar, and I got that for like, it's a merit scholarship, and I got the Women in Tech scholarship for Asia Pacific, but there are scholarships for women in business, women in engineering, women in aerospace, if I'm not mistaken. So women in very like male-dominated fields, so they have different scholarships for undergrads that want to study in those fields. Other places to find scholarships for internationals would be Opportunity Desk, Youth Opportunities. Just like go online and monitor those. Like I like to follow Opportunity Desk on Twitter and just see like all of their openings for scholarships there. But you can also check out the Opportunity Desk website and look for funding or like study scholarships available. So hope that helps. Next question is, did you also do any studying in advance during your gap year in prep for Stanford? So I did not do much studying, like academic studying in preparation for Stanford, but I did like, there's a reading list that they sent us incoming freshmen. So I did that. And then, I mean, a lot of the classes that I'm taking this semester, like it's not final yet, but the classes I'm taking, like a lot of them I've never formally taken before. So they're like introductory courses. Like I'm looking at doing introductory economics, introductory like data science, that sort of thing. So no advanced prep during my gap year, but I do know people that really like wanted to be able to keep up with their like academic, or like retain like a lot of their like math skills or like foreign language skills, and like kept that up throughout their gap year. So if that's something that you want to incorporate in your gap year, like go ahead, like that would be really great. Like taking like a language course, or just like any course that you want to be able to use to like prep for college is really definitely helpful. Okay. Next question is, going on a gap year, does that mean you would be older than the average age of your graduating class? Yes, technically. So I am 19, and I'm in an incoming freshman at 19, and I know that's like slightly older. So yeah, but it overall, like I don't know what like the average age, like it depends, I guess, like per school what the average is. But for me, it's like I'm only like a year older, like 1 to 2 years older than most of my peers. So not like a humongous age gap, I would say, especially if you are like on the younger side. So I know people that went on gaps and like they graduated high school at 17, entered college at 18. So that's like them just fitting like right in. Whereas for me, like I was kind of like an average age of my high school class, but I'm not so sure about like Stanford what the average age is for there. But that really like isn't really something that I think about like a lot, or like that's not really something that I guess people talk about like in the class chats. Like I don't even know like how old most of my peers are. I just assume they're like in the 17 to 19 range right now. Okay. If you applied for financial aid, is the financial aid offered by Stanford enough? And with the financial aid plus scholarship, you have to pay a large amount of tuition. Okay, so for that, I did not apply for financial aid. I just used the only kind of like aid or like scholarship I received was from Zonta through that Women in Technology scholarship. So I'm not entirely sure about the specifics about that question there, but I know that if you go on YouTube, you can look up like Stanford financial aid, and there are a bunch of students that are talking about their experiences with that would be much more like knowledgeable than I am. So hope that helps. Okay. Next question is, does Stanford have a rule where we have to stay in campus for the first year? So for the fall quarter, there are only a limited number of students allowed on campus, so that those are student athletes, international students, and those with special circumstances. So if you feel like your home situation isn't conducive to online learning, you can appeal and be given housing right now. So yeah, I mean, it's not required. Like most of the classes are really going to be online with a couple of exceptions in person. Okay. Next question is, how did you start your own nonprofit? How do you keep motivated? Okay. Yeah, so no worries. I started my own nonprofit. Basically, my story really starts in middle school, and I was in a Philippine computer class, like Philippine mandated computer class. And this computer class was not about programming. It was about how to use skills like Microsoft Office, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, the likes. And I didn't find it honestly like that fascinating until one day my teacher decided to go completely off curriculum and introduced us to this game where a snake had to navigate a maze using blocks that represented lines of code. I distinctly remember that being the first time in my life that I realized that the apps and the websites that I had relied on a pretty daily basis were made using code. And I was told that it wasn't programming, wasn't part of the curriculum. So I went online to explore, and I found out about the gender gap in tech in the process. And really launching WiTech was really a blog back in 2016 that aimed to feature the different stories of women in technology from around the world. But we transformed into a nonprofit organization when we hosted the first Women in Tech conference for students and vice students in the Philippines. And that was really in response to seeing that we weren't having a lot of like gender diverse speakers and panelists at different tech events back home in the PH. So with that, like we also expanded into our Women in Tech Teach program through noticing that most of our participants came from middle to upper class backgrounds, and we wanted to be able to include everybody regardless of their socioeconomic status in this like future of technology. So that's kind of the background on WiTech in terms of like the technicals of starting the nonprofit. It really dealt with identifying the problem, and our problems really the lack of equality in the tech industry in terms of gender representation and accessibility to resources. So we're really building a world in tech where all youth, regardless of their gender or socioeconomic status, have access to tech and the potential to use it for social good. So that was how we identified the problem. We formed a solution by starting the blog, doing the different events, and really recruiting via social media. And we were able to scale via social media as well, and just through really documenting our projects and making sure that we keep an updated social media presence. So that's how WiTech really started. I keep motivated really by just remembering my why, remembering my end goal of helping build like a more equal tech industry for present and future generations. So that's what motivates me. And I really want to be able, and I chose Stanford to like link up to your last question. I chose Stanford because I'm really passionate about bridging those inequalities in tech. And I know that takes an interdisciplinary approach in terms of studies. So I want to be able to, yes, take classes in CS, but also classes in sociology, in anthropology, in psychology, and education. And the course that I want to study, Science, Tech, and Society, STS for short, is really a conglomeration of disciplines in the STEM and humanities fields. And it's a very specific course, very interdisciplinary course that's offered at Stanford that I'm really excited to embark in. And not gonna lie, like it's definitely a big plus as well that Stanford has all these resources and all these world-class professors. But at its core, I'm also really excited to learn alongside people from around the world and hopefully engage with the resources that Silicon Valley, just besides Stanford, like has to offer. Okay, next question is, what other colleges did you apply to? So I applied to colleges in the US and the UK. So when it came to decisions, I was really contemplating between Stanford and UCL, which is University College London in the UK, because I also got into the Science, Tech and Society course in UCL. Oh, you're welcome, Amanda. Thank you for asking questions. Yeah, so between UCL and Stanford, I chose Stanford because I would be able to go in to the university and take any classes, even those outside of my like intended major, whereas in STL, everything was quite like rigid and that all the classes I would be able to take, like, had to stick to like the STS concentration. So yeah, and Stanford's very hard to say no to, so that's why I also chose it. Okay, next question. Why didn't you apply for local universities in the Philippines? Oh yeah, or why did you apply? Or did you apply? Okay, I didn't apply to schools in the Philippines, and like I really acknowledge like how much of a privilege that is to just like consider schools abroad, and I'm really grateful to my parents for supporting me in going abroad. And I think it also helps that like I have family in both of those countries, in the US and the UK, but yeah, nothing against like Philippine universities. They offer like great education. It's just that I personally really wanted like a liberal arts interdisciplinary education, and I felt like I could get that type of education at a much and much more like resources as well in terms of interdisciplinary study abroad at places like the US and the UK. Okay, next question is, what was the biggest challenge or road bump during your gap year and how did you overcome it? Oh, okay. And also Samya, sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong. Yeah, feel free to contact me on Instagram and I can help you like look for the link for the scholarship. Just like DM me there. Like my contact details are just flashed on screen. Carolyn asked, what was the biggest challenge or road bump during your gap year and how did you overcome it? So my biggest challenge, I'd have to say, would be definitely adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic. It was really tough because I had so many exciting in-person events, speaking engagements, meetings that I had lined up, and having that really wiped out because of the pandemic was really disappointing. But I overcame it by just realizing like how privileged I am to still have like this access to technology, this access to Wi-Fi, a laptop at home. And I still have so many opportunities because of that resource. And I think when you remember how many opportunities are still available to us via just simply like online connection and a desktop or laptop at home, like I think it's a humbling thought to think about what more we can do with this connection. So that's something that I kept in mind, that my problems like were not like big in terms of like the scale of what was happening in the world, and I really just kept anchored and kept motivated by remembering that the work that we do in WiTech especially doesn't stop during a pandemic. If anything, we had to go and hire gear and plan fundraisers to bring tech to low-income communities and continue advocating for equal tech access to all. Because during the pandemic, like tech is basically synonymous with education. And when students don't get access to tech at home, they lose out on their education. So that's what motivated me, and that's how I overcame that kind of road bump that was everything in the COVID-19 pandemic and how it affected my gap year. So yeah, any other questions, comments? Oh, okay. Interesting question from Amanda. Did you have relatives or friends who were not in favor of your gap year? How did you deal with them? Yes, I did. So I did have classmates that would say to me, they'd be like, Audrey, like, why are you crazy? Like, why are you doing a gap year? Like, are you not excited to go to Stanford? Like, in that really like judgmental tone. At least it came across as very judgmental. And it even came to a point where somebody kind of joked to me, like they said like, wow, like why are you taking somebody else's slot in like the next class? And I was like, personally, it doesn't work like that, you know, like we can't stay for sure if it's like in a thought for thought basis, and at the same time, like, don't hate, like, this is how I want to like spend my time doing like service work and advocacy work, so who are you to judge that? So really just shake off like the comments, and it's just really important, I think, to focus on like your immediate support system. And for me, that was my close circle of friends and my parents, who were both like in favor of this gap year because they understood the logic, the reasoning behind it, and were able to like look at my gap year doc and like say like, okay, like she has a plan. So that's how I dealt with them. So yeah, any other questions, comments, anything at all? Because I will just proceed to, oops. Okay, because I will just proceed to flash my contact details. So if you want to keep in touch with me or hit me up for any questions, comments, anything at all, just feel free to message me there. I'm on LinkedIn. I have my email, Twitter over there. Oops. So yes, that's all my contact details. Oh, thank you so much, Amanda. I'm really happy you enjoyed. Okay, one last question from Carolyn. How were you able to look out for connections while networking? So that was really through physically going to events, but now it's more like going to different webinars, opportunities available online, things like this, and really connecting, not just with the speakers, but the fellow participants. So engage with people in the chat box, get to know them better. If you're also, I think another way that I really like to make friends online or in connections online is through just going on LinkedIn and seeing people's work and like hitting that connect button if ever I really am interested in learning more about someone's work. It also doesn't hurt to shoot a cold message or an email to somebody whose work that you admire, want to get to know better, and just ask if you can schedule a quick call to connect or learn more about this person's work. So that's how I really looked out for connections. Oh, and also following hashtags specific to things you're interested in. So I would like to like add that in the beginning of WiTech and up until now, I would really follow the hashtag Women in Tech on Instagram, and that way, like, I'd be able to network and really keep tabs on like the different Women in Tech posts and connect with people that I found interesting. So really, don't be afraid to cold message or email people who you are interested in learning more about, and utilize platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn to really showcase your advocacy and connect with other people's advocacies. So yeah, that's kind of it for today. Again, like if you have any other questions, concerns, feedback, comments, you can contact me there. I hope you enjoyed this workshop, and please let me know how your gap years go if you do end up going on a gap year. And yeah, thank you again for coming, and take care, everyone.
Thank you, Audrey, for speaking.
Thank you, Chantal, and to the rest of the Femme For Education team. This has been really fun. Yeah, let me know if ever you guys have any questions. Don't be shy, and wishing you all the best for those of you that are planning on going on gap years yourselves. Like, this is by no means like a one-size-fits-all process. So I'm excited for you all, because the gap year is really what you make of it. So I hope you guys have a blast. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.